Welcome to Big Blend Radio's fourth Wednesday Tucson Sisters in Crime show. Now, the Tucson Sisters in Crime is a super cool chapter of the international organization known as Sisters in Crime. The organization is made up of authors, writers, readers, librarians, editors, publishers, agents, and booksellers, all who have a passion for the mystery genre. And so we're very excited because every fourth Wednesday, we get to interview one of the authors. And if you're into the Southern Arizona, if you're in Southern Arizona or interested in the Southern Arizona mystery community, check them out. Go to TucsonSistersInCrime.org. Today, we're excited because we're going to geek out on geology. We're going to chat with Tucson writer Susan Cummins Miller. She is what she calls a recovering field geologist, a college instructor, and she's the author of 6 Frankie McFarland geologist mysteries. Her poems, short stories, and essays appear frequently in journals and anthologies. She's got a big list of books, let's just put it that way. And you can learn more. Go to her website, SusanCumminsMiller.com. That's CUMMINS, SusanCumminsMiller.com. She's also on Facebook. But welcome, Susan. How are you?
Hi, I am excellent. Thank you.
Hey, this is so cool to have you on the show because you have traveled all over doing geology work and teaching. And right before we pushed that record button, you taught me a whole bunch in a way that I just got it immediately. And it's exciting. You know, geology is, for some of us, very difficult to get into our brain, kind of like history sometimes. You start hearing dates and you're like, what? So what you writing these mysteries that have geology connected, I think has got to be very excited for those of us who want to learn, but have a hard time with those big words like chasm.
Yeah, the little one. You notice my titles got shorter and shorter and shorter.
That's good.
So we got to chasm. Yes.
Yes.
Well, my idea, I needed to work from home. Because I had 2 young children, one of whom was special needs. And so how was I going to keep my hand in geology and anthropology and ecology and all the ologies from home? And I thought, well, geology and paleontology, they're detective stories. So you're collecting data at the surface of the earth, you're extrapolating backwards in time, the 4th dimension, right? So I said, it's just like a mystery. We all know this. We talk about it among ourselves, that it's a detective story when we go out in the field. And I had made maps. I worked in geology, working for the U.S. Geological Survey. And then I had taught at community colleges. So the idea was to have a protagonist, Frankie McFarland, who much younger and smarter version of myself, who could take the reader to places they might or might not have visited, and to give them that 4-dimensional aspect to the place through solving a mystery. So she is not a detective per se, she's not a police officer, but by moving her around, I also around the West, I solved the problem of her running into too many dead bodies in Tucson, which, the Jessica Fletcher syndrome, they call it, where she had to actually start going out all over the country and the world as well, because how many dead bodies could you have in Cabot Cove?
Exactly.
Except before you killed off the entire population.
Exactly. All of a sudden, there's 13 people left.
Yes, exactly.
And they're all relatives. Now what?
Now what? So I started out the series, and that was a big choice. I wrote the first book to see if I could write it and if I enjoyed the process, and you will never see that book. I rewrote it 6 or 7 times, realized the tone was wrong, that the subject matter was too serious for the tone. They just didn't match. It wasn't coherent. So I took my first writing, creative writing course, and he said, well, why don't you do the prequel? So I said, well, he offered to read the book, and he agreed with me. And so I started writing what happened before. So I understood Frankie more.
Oh,
And he said, yeah, go with that. It's light years better than the one I'm reading. And so I took Frankie back to where I stopped working for the US Geological Survey. So I was mapping out in northeastern Nevada, stone's throw from Utah, stone's throw from Idaho, in the overthrust belt, as they call it. And that was where I put Frankie. I renamed the town so I could play with street names and put a few things there that weren't there. But a description of that town in Death Assemblage is dead on. Anybody who had been there would recognize it.
ah,
And so that's Death Assemblage. And each of the titles of the books are geologic in nature, but they also have, they resonate with something to do with the characters or the backstory or what happens in the book. So Death Assemblage is an assemblage of fossils brought together after death. And there's a serial killer as well on the loose, killing bodies, which is assembling death in the present tense. So you had that play on the term. So
Wow.
that's where I started with Frankie, and she's finishing up her dissertation field work. And then she's going to go back home to Tucson.
all right. So now Tucson, I mean, when you think about geology and, well, the desert is good for dead bodies, you know.
Yes. Yes.
People bury dead bodies.
Well, I have a friend who found a dead body.
Especially outside of Las Vegas seems to be the popular spot.
A friend found a dead body in Anza-Borrego Desert State Park, and part of the foot was chewed off by the coyotes.
Yep.
And maybe the vultures got in there and the body swelled up. I mean, this was, you know what, it's kind of, he's like, you'd think, oh, cool, but it's,
It's
that's kind of
not.
weird.
Cool.
It's not cool, and it
cool.
stinks. And
No,
so here we go.
It's not cool.
But there's, and it's sad because in that area actually is a lot of immigrant. Well, in Tucson,
Mhm.
People crossing over the border, and they do die if they don't have water and, from heat. So there's that. But then there are the serial killers, and there's killers, and the desert seems to, attract people. And then you have to look at the different kind of bones, right? Because the bones, well, everything is in the bones, and the teeth will tell you who, what, and where. Like, do you get into DNA of the bones? Like, can you tell who somebody is by their bones? I know teeth, but what about the bones?
Well, it would depend on how they were preserved, how well they were preserved, whether that you could use DNA or not. And Frankie doesn't do that, but you have forensic anthropologists at the U of A, and you've got everything has become so very sophisticated that you can do a lot with DNA, at least with, general typing. And you can link that. It's just a piece of evidence that you can collect, but it's very expensive. So if you have a body or bones recovered from the desert, and you have quite a few, who is paying for doing the DNA analysis on that? It's kind of that extra step. I don't know. I mean, it takes a lot of resources, and if a local establishment is overwhelmed, they're not going to have the resources to do that.
Yeah, it's going to depend on who, what, and
Yes.
We were listening to a thing on NPR. I don't know if it was NPR. It was like a crime story. We listen to all kinds of weird stuff when we travel, and which is good. In some areas you want to listen to the local music and see what's up, especially Louisiana and things. But there was a crime show, and it was a true crime story where they kept this case going, and they were talking about, the cost of it. Well, they found this woman's head, and the lady was all into, just the head. And then she thought, is it a mass murder? So the sheriff eventually had the head in this solution, and it was in the office, and they kept trying to find her. And eventually it turns out that the rest of her body was donated for, like, your
Science.
parts get sold
Yes.
if you want. So like, if I die, they can look and see how much wine I had in my liver,
Mhm.
could cut me up,
Yes.
and I'll donate that to science. But I didn't know there's actually a market for your body parts.
Oh, yeah, there's a
And
black
so
market.
that's what happened. There's a black market, and there's
Yeah.
I think it's all black market, but even in universities, they use this
Mhm.
for, I mean, did you get to do any of that kind of stuff when?
Ew.
Not back when I was in school, and that wasn't a thing way back when. I haven't, and I wasn't in medical school per se. So,
Yeah.
they when you're in medical school, I mean, you're assigned a cadaver, and their name,
Mm.
you'll name it, or so I've heard. And this is,
Well, I kind of think they're connected. That's what I think.
yeah,
Paleontology
they
and
are all connected.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And so I took enough units in biology for a degree. I didn't ask for that one, but you have to understand biology. You have to understand biogeography.
Mm.
You have to do paleontology well. You have to understand geology. There are so many. Everything is linked.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so the more background you have, the better you are as a scientist.
Mm.
And I was just interested in all of that. So I took as many different courses as I could.
Yeah.
And so now you know how to write a murder and where to put the body.
That's it. And I take great joy in setting some of the mysteries, the mysteries where I have lived and worked. So if I worked with a team, for instance, in northeastern Nevada, the other members of that team can relish reading it and revisiting it. I wrote Fracture and set it in the Bay Area, where Frankie went to Stanford and got a co-terminal master's. And I did that because my husband had gone to Stanford. I was teaching and working at the U.S. Geological Survey, and I taught at College of San Mateo. So I took you, the reader, where I took my classes on their field trips in geology and oceanography. And that fracture for that book, what's the main fracture? We've already talked about it. Running the length of California is the San Andreas Fault and related faults. So I have Frankie going back to that place, and there are the memories attached to that place. But all of the different areas where I have lived and worked and taught, I try to capture in a story. Hoodoo is down in the Chiricahua Mountains.
Oh, right around the corner. I mean, the land of standing up rocks.
Yes, exactly. And a friend had a ranch down there, a small holding, and I got to ranch sit.
Cool.
For all of her animals, and
That's awesome.
But
now we love that.
It's a sky island. It's a sky island, so you have these birds coming in and animals crisscrossing the border. It's a unique environment. It's a unique ecology.
I love it up there.
And plus, it has the history of the Chiricahua Apache.
Geronimo. The battle, the Apache Wars,
exactly.
Bascom Affair. I mean, it's really interesting out there. So when you think about on the geological side and going back to how everything's connected, you were just talking about birds, and you were saying even before we push the record button that there's ravens going off outside. So when you think about a body being buried, right? So my mind immediately goes, are the coyotes and the vultures going to know? Like if we were in Africa, the hyenas would sniff it out.
Oh,
no. Like, so when you're in these natural environments, the wild animals could, uncover your dead body, wouldn't they? Or not?
Well, in Quarry, that's exactly what happened. In the third book, there are two storylines, one taking place in the Mojave Desert,
Oh, cool.
and then a second at the place where Frankie was getting her PhD, and she goes back for her dissertation defense, and somebody's killing her, the professors on her in the department. This was a
Wow.
big hit. This was a big hit with my geology department. They had me out there to talk, and so I described where I went to school, and I gave it a different name. But yes, there is a body that is found at the edge of campus in a ravine where nobody visits. And yes, the coyotes had, been at him. It really depends on how fresh the body is that you're finding. And in Hoodoo, the fourth book, the one in the Chiricahuas, it's a fresh body. So nothing had happened except the vultures, of course, were circling. And that, they can smell something. Do you really want this on your radio?
Yes, we
Sure.
do. We do. I
Absolutely.
geek out on this stuff.
I mean,
Nancy will talk about rhino pee just now. I mean, she
yeah,
does.
I'm really close to it.
I've already before we recorded, I was talking about this, the smell of camel spit. So let's go for dead body
Let's
smell.
go for it. I mean,
But
and
the vultures are what you see first, usually.
right. And
That
they really, I don't know which is better, their sense of smell or sight.
Yeah, well,
Because-
the smell is remarkable.
Yeah.
But the sight, I mean, you're
Yeah.
right. It's
Because
but
they're
they're
there
the
like
ones-
that.
and you can see them. In fact, in the very first book, she recognizes something's wrong, Frankie does, because she sees the vulture circling,
Yeah.
and she knows exactly what that means. We all do. When
Yeah.
we're out in the desert, you can really see them.
Mm.
You can't see them as clearly. When I lived back in Virginia, and you really can't see them as easily because it's heavily forested in these deciduous forests. Whereas I love deserts.
Yeah, they're
Mm.
awesome.
All right there and open for you, and you can see skies forever.
Mm.
And you learn to read it. I mean, that's the thing. What I find with what you're doing too is you have to understand the land to understand, okay, the dead body thing. But there's so many times in being in places that you've been and lived in, worked in, studied in, taught in, it's a place that's familiar to you. And that's something where people will write about something. And if they've never been there, that's a very difficult thing to do. You've got to learn about the vegetation, the
You do.
vultures. You can't have a black vulture in desert in Tucson, but you can have them in Florida, in the swamp. They may pick it out of the Everglades. We've seen that, but not the body. But, so it's, you've really got to understand, and there's a sense of feeling that you have of a place. And I don't know what it's called, but when you go to different areas, there's it's not just, it's a personal atmosphere,
Right. I agree with you. I think what I found is that if you are writing the kind of mystery that is set in a city, like New York or Moscow, you could probably get all the information you needed from a library, because Gorky Park, for instance, he hadn't gone to Moscow. He went to the library in New York City, and he wrote this phenomenal book, and he had never been there, but he could get everything he needed about a city from the library. But what you're talking about is all of the senses working when you're out, and it's just you and the environment. It's just you and the landscape. It's the details. And if you shut off the noise,
Yeah. Now
which
you
is
sense.
what cities represent to me, if you shut off the noise, then you can open up everything else and just take it in. So
and you
what I
bring that to your readers is to get them to have that feeling of
Right.
place. And that's hard to do,
If you go
It is
sit
very hard.
and blindfold yourself
Oh,
sit
here
on
she
a rock
goes.
yeah, I know. Sit on a rock out in the desert or
Yes.
on the coastline or somewhere. Just so blindfold yourself and use your sense of smell, because as long as your eyes are working, your sense of smell just isn't quite there. It
Right.
really isn't. It kicks in a lot faster if you're not looking.
And if you blindfold yourself, you're forcing your ears,
Mhm.
hearing,
Yes.
to
Yeah.
perhaps pick out things that you wouldn't
Mhm.
even note
Yeah.
when you were, because we do use our eyes so very much.
Mhm.
There was an interesting, I see you have the picture of my anthology up there, and one of the women in there was Mary Austin, and she wrote of the land. She wrote Land of Little Rain, Land of Journey's Ending, and a million other things. But she was transported from the Midwest, actually, closer to the Appalachians, but all the way to the Fort Tejon area in California. And this is back in the late 1800s. She was overwhelmed.
Mm.
It was so different than anything she'd perceived. For 2 years, she said she just would go out and she would lie among the plants. She would learn the plants. She would learn the she wouldn't talk. She just didn't talk. And she absorbed this new landscape, and then later on was able to write the essays in Land of Journey's Ending or Land of Little Rain. And I think it's that allowing yourself to be overwhelmed by a place that I'm trying to capture in words, and it's hard. You're right. You said it's hard. Yes, it's hard.
You have to paint. It's like painting a picture with words, but it's a feeling.
It's a feeling more than, we had a housekeeper in Kenya that I took her to the coast and she'd never seen the ocean. And she just stood there from like 5 a.m. till it got dark staring. And she stood in the same place and stared out at the same place. She didn't eat all day. And I kept going out to her and saying, hey, that's nice. You need to come back inside. And, it's getting dark. And she keeps going, madam, like she just couldn't grasp the ocean.
No,
The
some
intensity
tribes
of
think it's evil. They the understanding and the fear, and then some drink the salt water.
She was given Coca-Cola bottles by some of her friends to fill up because they thought it was medicine, and she was like, not doing it.
Hypo.
Not doing it.
So it's just that
it was
feeling,
amazing.
yeah. Whereas we
she
go,
was-
oh, let's go to the beach. It's exciting. So those different feelings that come in, and just to, I mean, that was some true angst.
Yeah, because the next day she just turned her back on it. She wouldn't look at it at all. That was like, no, it's
Really?
not there, not there, nope, not there.
Oh,
That
see,
was really.
I could sit there. Some of my favorite memories are literally we would camp at the beach, and we camped all over we camped at lakes and beaches, and this was before everybody else was camping there. And I would go, I had lots of brothers and sisters, but they would leave me alone. Susan's just, off in her world. And I could sit just like this woman did. She stood, but I could sit there today and just watch the ocean and listen to it and smell it and be awed by it.
So you have attention to detail, yet have the emotion on top of it, right? There's attention to detail to geek out and do the mapping and everything. However, maps have texture.
Yeah.
Yes.
We love maps.
You
Yeah.
love maps.
We love maps.
Some people love maps. I was raised with loving maps. And so going and making maps was something that
That's cool.
always made me happy. And I'll tell you what, one of the happiest moments in the past 3 years was, and we all know it's been a crazy few years, hasn't it?
Mhm.
But the work I had been part of a team working in southeastern Idaho for several years.
Ooh, pretty.
Back with the again the overthrust belt, and the mapping was, we had the map all ready to go by the time I left the U.S. Geological Survey. The map was ready to go, but it kind of got into cold storage somewhere.
Oh,
And finally, my husband started, pushing buttons with people, and it got published in I think 2018.
Wow.
Finally, this work that I had done when I
wow.
was Frankie McFarlane's age, and yes, that map that I could now hold in my hand, and my areas, this southern third, and then 2 other people are on, divide the upper 2/3. That made me happy.
Yeah.
And you're
Cool.
right, there's a texture to it, but it's 2-dimensional, but it's a representation of something that's 3-dimensional.
And there's stories.
Yeah.
And the stories there.
There's
Okay,
stories.
so
Yeah.
now that we're going through climate change,
Yeah.
don't the maps change? Because now, like Nancy does all these googly maps, and then there's these heat zones, and there's all these different
Yeah.
online things which is totally geeked out in terminology. I'm like, dude, I just love maps. But
Yeah.
but there's all these layers. So as things change, do the maps start to change with glaciers melting and earthquakes happening, rock slides, avalanches? Do any of those factors start to change the lay of the land? And when I'm talking about maps, I'm not talking about, okay, turn left at the tree.
No. I get exactly what you're saying. And in a way, many of those things, if not all of them, can change the what we map, what is the topography
Right.
of the land. So if you take the Mississippi, it has changed course many times, and an earthquake forced it to alter its course. But you have towns that from way back, or settlements that might have been drowned, and you have settlements that are now far from the actual water's edge, because it's a meandering river course, and which before it was controlled by dams, would have floods, which would change where the river ran. And you will have you can have mountains that I mean, there was a Hebgen Lake, I think is the name of it, up in the Yellowstone area, where you had this massive rock slide. Okay, that actually literally does, yes, change the face of that mountain.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it will change the topography, how the contour lines are drawn that show that mountain. An earthquake could do the same thing. If it was a massive earthquake and you had concomitant, rock slides, and let's take volcanoes.
Oh yes, we must.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That you take a volcano. Back when I was working at the survey, there was another geologist, and he was overseeing Mount St. Helens. He was
cool.
on duty, right, Dennis, and it exploded northwards. It took out that entire north face of the mountain. Then you had the Toutle River carrying this massive debris flow down and scouring, but carrying it down to the ocean. So you've got a volcano changing shape, and the river, I haven't looked at before and after courses of the river, but the hillsides are now blanketed with ash. that's going to
Could be a
change
new
their
layer.
contours.
Mhm.
So the answer, that's a long answer.
No, but it's cool.
But it's true.
Because it's true. And I think that's what's so important about having these maps over time. So you can see how things have changed and morphed. It lets us know the history of the land as well, the geological history. So now when I'm going to get back into the murders and the bodies,
Okay, well, that's fine.
because this is all connected. It's
It
connected.
is all
It's
connected.
all connected.
Mhm.
So there's a body, buried somewhere, or look, we're having all these floods and they're finding bodies like they pop up down here. Like, ooh,
Yeah, they pop up and they're
who
like,
knew
oh,
that
where'd
that
that
who
come
knew
from?
that it would flow all the way down, whatever.
Mhm.
So Frankie is invaluable in this kind of thing because of understanding maybe a change of topography that was sudden, because it could be a sudden, look at flash floods that are
Yes.
like
Mhm.
Tucson, right?
Mhm.
So something could change that way,
Mhm.
but a geologist will understand where somebody could be, could either fall and die, or where they could be buried, and what can you excavate as a human being? I mean, it's true. Are you going to go out in the middle of the desert with a forklift or one of those bobcat things and dig it up, or are you going with a shovel? So a geologist will know that's humanly impossible for someone to dig through that. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure. If you're talking about the terms I'm using, bedrock and overburden.
Oh, okay, there it
So,
is.
right. So bedrock is you're not going to be able to dig through it with, yes, you can mine with a pick, but it's going to take a while. But let's just take, I wrote a scene for a short story, and it's exactly what you have described. And it was, I think we were having flash floods based on, abundant rainfall. And what had happened was that the flash flood eroded the bank and revealed, yes, a body.
Mm.
Cool.
Okay. But people have been known, I mean, if you read old Westerns, people have been known to stories, people have been known to carry bodies down to a riverbank,
Mhm.
especially along, the Platte or the Missouri or whatever, and
Oh yeah.
cave in the bank over them because it's just sand.
Right.
It's not consolidated rock. It's not bedrock. And so, yes, it's a very easy way. In fact, in the first book, in Death Assemblage, that's happening to Frankie herself. So, yes, it does happen. And if people aren't dead, it's a little possible that they'll survive, which Frankie does to have another bunch of adventures. But it's the same thing when you go to the beach. And, my sons would dig deep holes.
Right.
Mhm.
We're going to China and
We're
Australia
going
on the way.
China. There we go.
Mhm.
And there would be no wood to, reinforce them. But we would make sure they're not too deep.
Yeah.
And then we would play a little game, which is we would say, okay, how do you help your brother? And they were pretty young. How do you help your brother out of a situation when it's deeper than his head?
Mm.
What do you have here? Look around. What do you have here to help him get out? And then they
Wow.
would change places. And they
See,
came
you
up
were
with,
practicing the mystery,
Yeah.
the murder mystery from like
Oh.
early
my poor
on.
children.
It used to be we're playing forts, but mom's murdering us
What
and
is-
saving us
what
at the
is-
same time.
What do your children do now? Can I ask?
Yeah, well, the younger one is a chemist.
Oh,
And
Okay.
so he's a detective.
so when
right?
you do poisons and stuff, do you call him up?
he knows so much about things that I know nothing about. Yes. And then the older one got his degrees in media arts. So he works for the
Wow.
community college, and he takes lessons and he adapts them for the hearing impaired, for visually
Oh, wow.
impaired,
That's
for
wonderful.
Nice.
so that
Yeah.
every child who attends the community college can
Wow.
have an equal opportunity to learn from whatever class it is.
Very
So,
cool.
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah,
This-
this is awesome. I know we're going all over the map with this conversation, but that's cool. So with, talking about your son being a chemist and, hey, I've got this, concoction, I'm going to kill somebody off with this. They're going to drink this. Is this really going to happen? Then you got to think about, okay, maybe it's, you put, you know, arsenic and acid in the soil. Is it going to eat the body away? And then geology wise, okay, yes, no. So everything's connected, like you're saying. But now with what you're doing at being a member of the Tucson Sisters in Crime, I know you guys have all these workshops and speakers, experts come in, teach about ammunition and, if you really want to kill somebody, this is how you do it. So
Yes.
do you get any authors calling you up and saying, hey, I'm digging a body, I'm going to put a body over here. Would this work geologically speaking?
I have occasionally, usually they rarely, yes. Sometimes I get an email from a friend saying, will this work? And other times it's when I'm teaching a workshop and showing how forensic geology works. And
Cool.
they'll ask the questions, because
Mm.
I find most people like the face-to-face contact, because they're not quite sure how to put the question.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes you can draw it, right? Sometimes you can hem and haw around it, and it takes a little while to get there. But I'm becoming more and more visual as I age. And so, I'll sit there, I'll hand them a pencil and say, try and make a chart of what you're saying, or
Yeah.
or draw it, or just hold the pencil as you talk. Sometimes just holding a pencil, I've found, makes people much more comfortable with talking. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's a personality thing. Like, I tap my feet all the time when it's part of a brain thing. They say that when you study, we took a teaching class through Super Camp. They're a summer academic achievement program for teens and preteens, and they learn what's called the 8 keys of excellence, and they learn how to study. And it's how your brain works. And apparently, if you listen to Baroque music while you're studying, that part of your brain, like what you're saying, holding a pencil, which also gets you a call to attention that your brain is now going to get stuff in there.
Right.
It's that same thing. Like, I'm one of those people that something has to calm that one side of my brain. Normally it's Nancy hitting me over the head. No.
So
There we go.
Hey, why not?
You need people like Nancy in your
Yes,
life.
to go, okay, now focus, but
that's
it is
enough of that.
yeah, like I can listen to music while I work, and some people can't, but I think it's that. But it's interesting that you're teaching workshops, because forensic geology, you don't hear about it. And I also think it's interesting that that's your genre of mystery, basically, because how often do you hear of a geology based mystery series? You don't. And I think that's something for authors that are into mysteries or writing at all, that go with something that really well, maybe, and you still investigate and learn and research. I'm not saying don't, but what you have a passion for, right? And so if
That's
it's
the key.
geology,
Yeah.
who would have thought that geology would be,
And you're sort of teaching at the same time,
yeah,
a
That was
very entertaining way, which is
Well,
way
and-
better.
when I first started sending these out, that I would get the responses from publishers or agents saying, well, you're writing above the genre, or it's too literary, or
Oh,
and I'm thinking, well, no, it's just a story. And so then I met this I went to a Women Writing the West conference, and one of the other attendees was the editor at Texas Tech, and she, former editor in chief. Well, she said, come have dinner with me and tell me what you're working on, because all that was out at that time was the anthology. And she says, I have your anthology sitting on my desk, and I want you to write for us. And I thought,
cool.
at the end of dinner, I said, well, she said, if you could write anything in the world, what would it be? And I said, well, I want to go back and see if I can publish my mysteries. And she had no intention of publishing mysteries. And then, but she said, okay, send me your novel. So I sent it to her, and I heard back in a week or two, and she said, okay. When I got home, the president of Texas Tech had called a meeting, and he said he wanted the university to focus on the STEM subjects. So science, technology, engineering, and math.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, we need to find a way to approach people that is easier for them. And she kind of raised her hand and said, I have this mystery that's by a geologist. So she saw it and he saw it as a way to reach people and interest them, get below those barriers that people have about science being too hard or too complex and I can't understand it. So that was how I got hooked up with Texas Tech.
This is exciting. This is very exciting. We've just done 2 interviews. One is still to come out. Stone Soup for the Soul. It's really, it's about 100 young, it's a 100 compilation of 100 young heroes that are out doing things to combat climate change. It's very exciting. And the founder, Mariana, she was saying that we're facing a big problem in our schools, that green jobs and the green careers, the science careers, the geology, they're not talked about. And even the guidance counselors, are you wanting to be a fireman, a doctor? Nothing wrong with all of those.
Oh.
But as we move into a change in this world, that those subjects are not being handled. And just before her, we just aired this show, an interview with the author of Fierce and Delicate. It's a story, it's a compilation of essays. It's a memoir with using essays of Renee, who was a ballet dancer and then started battling with rheumatoid arthritis and writing about this. And it was a university press that published it. We were talking about this difference because it wasn't your normal novel that the big publishers will take, but it has that educational component. And I think university presses, I remember back when we were getting mail, getting catalogs from like New Mexico, Arizona. Oh my God, those catalogs with the books, it's like a shopping, like just send the whole thing to us and we want them all. But those books are, I think we really as a society and as readers, we need to start searching out the individual university presses more. And we can buy directly through them a lot of times instead of going, to the big place. The big place.
The middlemen.
Yes. But you know what I mean? So
the people who get most of the money.
I think it's really exciting. So what you're saying is really touching on something that we're seeing on the rise with the university press, and something that I think we just need to be more aware of and support more, but then also through that, maybe stimulating youth and teenagers who are looking at going to college that may not realize that, hey, this is something I'm interested in. You're making it cool.
That's the whole thing. And a lot of times my thought was, okay, the middle schooler or the elementary schooler, they might have an interest in rocks or fossils that their parent or grandparent sees. And so the books were really aimed at the parents or grandparents, right? So that because they're the ones that can take a child to places that can stimulate those interests and they can say, women can do it. See, these books show a woman doing it. And, and that is really important. But the STEM emphasis has just exploded. I know at the University of Arizona, for instance. So Texas Tech, Truth in Advertising, Texas Tech won't be publishing the series anymore. the editor I worked with originally, has retired, but it worked. It helped work because people were talking about STEM. The money's going into it. They are contacting. They have people at say the University of Arizona that are working with high schoolers and middle schoolers to show them that these fields, whether it's computer science or geology, these are open to you, and they're fascinating and they're fun. And the Tucson Festival of Books, in case you haven't been there, they always have a science
Really?
area.
Oh, very cool.
If you haven't had a personal experience that makes you interested, these things are great. But the other side of it is to pique an interest so you can go search out an experience. I remember my dad was a rock hound, and he made jewelry from gems and minerals. So he took us to the desert all the time. Yep. And this one place we went, this is the desert, not the ocean. And we had our little buckets and our picks, and I was picking at this kind of sandy bank thing, and I found a shark's tooth in the desert. And I was like, no way, how can this be?
Dude.
Jaws
was here.
Jaws. It's like my mind couldn't get shark in the desert.
Where were you? Do you know?
Oh God.
Was it by Barstow? Out that used to go out Vasquez Rocks and all of that.
Mojave. So many Mojave Desert. But I'm thinking
because there's a place called Shark Tooth Hill where I took a field trip back when I was taking paleontology class. And yes, there's a place called Shark Tooth Hill in the Central Valley.
In California?
Yeah, it was not by the ocean. But I will tell you a story. As I say, my poor children. So we're in North Carolina, and we were taking our kids. It was Roanoke Island, and we were heading for the beach, the Outer Banks. We lived back there for a while, and there's this wonderful little museum type thing on Roanoke Island, and I'm walking along the trail, which has gravel on it, and I'm holding my 2 and 4-year-old son's hands, and I just stop and sit down in the middle of the trail and start high grading it, because there are shark's teeth, there are fish scales, there are skate teeth, there are
what?
And
cool.
I'm sitting there, and so the three of us are, and John, my husband, went on ahead, but we're sitting there. And their eyes are so good at that age. They're natural paleontologists. So it's
a treasure hunt.
We were high grading the trail that everybody walked on. So that happened to be brought in, I think, from a Miocene deposit in Florida. Wow. But it's if you keep your eyes open. The world is a joyous experience. There's always something to learn.
It is.
Hey, listen, I just saw fossilized dinosaur poo.
Yes, coprolite.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, well, I call it
and
dinosaur
you could make jewelry out of that too.
Yes, you could.
You can.
You could. And you might wear it.
It's like dinosaur drop earrings.
Yes, really. But I think it's so exciting, and the desert really brings up to me, it's especially Tucson, there's certain areas in Saguaro National Park, and where you feel, you can tell that, like geology, right? This was a water area or watershed area because of the temperature change. It will be cooler than up, so you go in those corridors, and there's no way you're going to tell me that wasn't underwater, that cactus was not, coral. There, I know it was at some point.
Well,
And then
I'm
mushrooms.
sorry it wasn't,
Oh,
but
come on. Oh, come on. And look,
Right.
ocotillos are kelp.
I knew you were going to get in
No.
trouble for that.
Yeah, well, you got in trouble about
underneath-
volcanoes with Jim Ostick. So that
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
using the playing
you're
field.
right. There was a caldera there in the Tucson Mountains. It depends on whether you were in Tucson National Park, east or west, but there are also very ancient seabeds that are there. That I mean, this volcano grew out of and up through deposits that are very old that were marine. So if that's what you're saying,
Yeah.
absolutely, yes.
But, okay, so you sure cactus can't, I mean, just be like a distant relative?
Of coral.
No.
Coral is almost like an
Well,
animal.
coral is like a fungus, right?
Coral
It's
is
kind of-
a different.
It's like
there are plants and animals.
yeah,
like
and then-
mushrooms.
Coral is the animal, and
yeah. Well, it's like mushrooms
ocotillo
are both.
See, mushrooms are right there with coral.
Yeah,
like they're
mushrooms are
little
part animal.
tweeners.
they're fungi.
Yeah, and they're fun.
Animals.
Okay, so I've got a weird question because, you know, I know we're talking to everything here. Why not? So now, right, we're losing species. Species
Yeah.
are going extinct. Obviously, humans doing it too, but also climate change.
Mhm.
And I find it very interesting, you know, with all these, you know, like the coronavirus and other viruses. And I wonder if we're going to get all these weird things happening because we're changing the nature of the planet, right?
Of course.
So it's heating up. So at the same time, we're finding species that are ancient popping up, like old school, like suddenly, you know, out in the Arctic, oh, here's this, you know, it's melted, like it's alive now. You know, I mean, look at this, you know, people want to still freeze their bodies and see if they can pop up awake, you know, 1,000 years from now, which I find very interesting. Imagine
That would
freezing
be
your body to
crazy.
see if you can, you know, but anyway, so we're getting that. So doesn't that connect in with geology and paleontology? I mean, what happens if fossils become alive just because you add hot water on them?
I don't think that's going to.
I
Oh,
don't think that's true.
so this is the 10 questions of crazy.
Yes. Well,
Welcome
and
to Lisa's mind.
everyone needs to ask those questions. It's asking the questions that's important,
Yeah.
and then listening for the answer. And so you're not going to have dinosaurs, you know, just the
No,
bones
be careful.
assemble together and pop up.
Darn it.
But yeah, but that doesn't mean that you know, based, you know, like Jurassic Park, that there aren't experiments somewhere going on in some laboratory
In
to
Japan.
cross, you know, DNA crosses, and with all the attendant wrong things that will happen.
Could happen, yes.
There are what you may be talking about is in certain frozen areas, presently frozen areas, there are bacterial species that survive in that survive or are dormant. That's still alive, but dormant in that particular world. Now, if it melts, you could
Yes.
have dormant species, but they're just sleeping.
That's like hibernation. then.
But I
Yeah.
read that parts of China that are melting, that there are viruses that are frozen, that are now thawing out.
So
Is that a
dormant.
threat or not?
So
Because viruses are,
Well, a virus is a species.
yes, and it's hard to kill them.
yeah.
It is, as we've all seen, right?
Mhm.
It is. We need scientists to work on all of these aspects of
Absolutely.
life and prevent further catastrophes, whether it's of humans or to the environment.
Mhm.
And to acknowledge, I mean, it seems so simple to us. Yes, climate is changing, but I can't even get all members of my extended family to agree on
Aren't
that.
you writing
Oh,
something
gosh.
about global warming?
I mention it in passing, and I also mention Extinction of Species. In the first mystery, Death Assemblage, the area Frankie is mapping crosses the Permo-Triassic boundary, the Permian and the Triassic. And there was erosion that took place before, at the end of the Permian and before the Triassic beds were laying down. They're marine in that area. But depending on, and it's variable, the estimation, 90%, 95% of species became extinct.
Wow.
That's
Now,
a lot.
That's a lot. It was a huge extinction event. And then
This is different than dormancy.
Oh, yes.
Big difference.
Yep, big difference. They became extinct. And so above this line is in the rocks, right? You have this abundance of life. You have ammonoids, and I mentioned this in the book. You have ammonoids, and you have trilobites. You have these beautiful, many different kinds of brachiopods, which is a bivalved animal, but is not a bivalve, quote unquote. Then you cross the boundary and things had changed. Then there'd been erosion. And when the Triassic beds were deposited, all of a sudden you have still fish, you have a few of the ammonoids left. And again, we have the chambered nautilus today. So that cephalopod is a descendant of older species.
I think that's what I was getting to. Yeah.
But but all of these lines of vibrant life came to an end. And it's very similar to not the causal effect, but the extinction of the dinosaurs, where you had a lot of animal species that became extinct.
Yeah, because one species goes out, and there's 3 species over here that depend on that one. So now all 4 go out.
It's a collapsing structure. You're exactly right. It's this house of cards in a sense.
Yeah.
And the miracle is that the early mammals or mammal-like the early mammals were able to survive that event. And then, of course, they radiated out to fill the niches of where the dinosaurs were before, and many of them. And then, of course, birds took to the air. So
this is cool.
Yes.
You know what? I get all excited about this stuff. I want to go back to school now.
I know.
I just suddenly feel like I'm a kid again. I'm like, okay, this is exciting. Well, this is cool. I mean, this is what you're doing with your books. What's your next book?
Well,
what's your next project? Because you do short stories, you do anthologies, poetry. What's next?
I have spent the pandemic. I said to myself, and it sounds morbid, but I said, okay, I'm of an age where I may not survive this pandemic, and I've got all this poetry sitting there kind of everywhere, and I need to get it together so my sons know, if I kick the bucket, then what are they going to do with it? So I have, believe it or not, I've been publishing poetry and writing new stuff. And I have a book of poems, a chapbook of poems coming out next February. They'll do a pre-order this fall, and then a book of poems coming out the next January. So from a small press. And so those 2 have been accepted for publication.
Awesome.
They're in press now. I have a history is one of my degrees.
Yeah.
Interests. And I have a historical mystery that's making the rounds, and that's set in
Nice.
1885 and set, well, it was supposed to start out set in the West, but I have had to get her. Most of it is set on it's a young woman, she's 15, getting her from Yokohama, Japan to the US to California, San Francisco in 1885.
Wow.
And before, so that I can then take her inland throughout the west of that time and introduce her to geologists who were active at the time. These phenomenal figures who were mapping the West at the time.
Cool.
Wow. This is so
Wow.
cool. Well, I'm so
So
glad we get to connect with you. And next time we
Yeah.
go to Tucson, I hope we meet you. Let's go rock hounding. We don't
Oh,
have to take the rocks out, but we can look at them.
We
Yeah.
can go take a hike up in, Sabino Canyon or something.
Oh, we love Sabino Canyon and Madeira Canyon's really
Oh,
fascinating to
yeah.
me. Like talk about the biodiversity and
Yes.
the rock changes and also
Lots of hummingbirds.
we spent a lot of time out in Aravaca area and
Oh,
talk about the geology through that region.
Mhm.
I mean, just all along the board, Chiricahuas, like you were saying. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, we're a little homesick at
Yeah.
times.
It sounds like
Yeah, you kind of made us like, oh, we really, we love Tucson. We really do. And February, I think, is our time to go west again. So maybe the Festival of Books will be on this year,
the
hopefully.
Festival of Books, it will be
I mean,
held
2022.
in March. It
In
will
March.
be held
Oh,
in,
okay.
but just remember and mark it on your calendars that
Yeah.
the first couple of weeks in February, and I don't know the exact date, but you have the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show, which is the
Huge.
biggest in the world.
Huge.
Should
So,
do that.
And I think that, it was difficult this last year, but, set your sights.
You never know. And
You
those shows
never
are
know.
really cool because you
Yeah.
really get to see, what's inside a rock.
Yes,
You
you get
know?
rocks, minerals, fossils,
Fossils, dinosaur
and all
food.
kinds of sparklies.
Oh, there's
Yeah.
Sparklies.
everybody wants the sparklies. You gotta have the sparklies. Well, everyone, you can keep up with Susan. Go to her website, susancumminsmiller.com. She's also on Facebook. And also for the Tucson Sisters in Crime. Man, I'm really digging these shows. Thanks, Eva Eldridge, for getting
Thanks,
this all
Eva
together.
It's
Eldridge.
just it's all these ladies that murder people.
I know, this is so cool. So TucsonSistersInCrime.org for all of you who are in Southern Arizona. It's actually a great way to find authors as well. So check out that website. And of course, keep up with us at BigBlendRadio.com. We air Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And keep up with us on BigBlendRadio.com to get our newsletter, so you get our digital magazines in your email. So thank you so much. Oh, and everyone, fourth Wednesday is when we do our Tucson Sisters in Crime show. So thanks so much, Susan. It's been a true pleasure.